Hey guys, it's Carla. Today I'm starting with a red canvas. I've already painted it red and I've sketched on my outline. And if you want this outline, it'll be in the description below. There'll be a link to my Facebook page and you can go on there and print this off along with the reference photo. So those are both free. So what I'm doing first is getting all my white in, all the lettering. And so I've sped this up so that I don't bore you with it, but I'm just using a small synthetic brush, whatever you're comfortable with, and getting all the white in. All right, so now I'm going to start on my flower. And that's just the first coat of the white. I'll have to come back later and brighten it up. But I want to get the first coat of the white in and then the first coat on the flower. So this is just a yellow and white mixture with a little bit of gold. In fact, on my palette, I've got raw umber, red, black, white, yellow, and this other color, you could use raw sienna. It's about the same shade, but this is called King's Gold. It's just what the brand calls it. So so gold or yellow or raw sienna, either one. It just gives me kind of a darker shade to go in my flower. So again, I'm just using a small synthetic brush and just getting all of my petals painted in. This is actually a really fun little painting. It's more detailed than I normally do. You know, I normally tell you to paint fast, keep your brush moving. This is more detailed and you have to slow down and paint it more precise, I guess. So now I'm just painting the whole background white, and again, speeding it up so that you don't have to wait through all that, but it's just white with a large synthetic brush, whatever you're comfortable with. All right, so now with a smaller brush, I'm going to tap in the center for my flower, and I'm just using raw umber. All right, so now I offloaded most of that brown and picked up some of the gold, and I'm just creating just a darker shade to go right up close to the center. There'll be several layers on this flower, so don't worry if you're not getting the look that you want right now. So now I've cleaned my brush and I'm going in with some yellow and gold, a yellow and gold mixture. And you can look at the reference photo and just see where the darks and lights are and colors and everything. And I mean, I'm kind of making it up as I go, but if you have the reference photo, then that might be easier. Now with the can, I do have a picture to go by that I went by in doing this, because that's not something I can make up in my head, because it does have to be pretty precise. I just wanted this petal to come down in front of the center. It just kind of adds some uniqueness to the flower. So now I'm mixing up a brighter shade just to add some more highlights and texture and character to the flower. And I didn't want to spend a lot of time on the flower, but you can, and so you can really get creative with this, with these petals and shades and colors and stuff. You could also do this with a different kind of flower. So you could pull up another reference photo online and do your own flower here. If you have like a favorite flower. Now right there at the center where it comes out into the petals, I don't want that to be real a sudden change. So I want it to be like kind of fade off into the flowers, into the petals, I mean. All right, so now I'm starting on the black in my can. And again, this is something you're just going to have to really look at the reference photo and see where your lights and darks are, which is what I had to do. So it's not a good idea to just try to do this by memory, because there's too many details in this can. It's not hard to do. It's not hard to paint once you've got the outline on there, but there are a lot of details that you have to pay attention to. So now I'm going in with my dark gray shade. So again, I'm just looking at the reference photo to see where that color is. And use a brush that you're comfortable with. If you're comfortable with a small flat brush, that's fine, that's what this is. If you want like a round brush, if that works better for you, just whatever you're comfortable with and the size that you're comfortable with, because like your painting might be bigger or smaller than mine, so you might have to go with a different size brush. This is like an 8x10 canvas, so I'm going with a pretty small brush, but if it was larger, I would up the size of my brush. Now I don't want to put the stem of my flower in until my can is completely finished on the top, because the stem is going to be coming over it. So that flower is just going to have to float there for a while. If y'all like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you've not subscribed to my channel yet, this would be a good time to do that. Like I said, I typically teach loose painting, just loose and free. This is not one of those, but I do, lately that's more what I've been teaching on here. So if you like that style, then there's quite a few videos of that. But there's also quite a few of this like more detailed, slower painting. You can see the top of the can is starting to come together, but it's a process. And I like to skip around so that some parts can dry while I do other parts, but you can also use a blow dryer and just dry it that way. All right, now I've switched to a round brush, just a round synthetic brush, and I'm watering down some brown. Pretty watered down. And I'm going to use this for the shading on the can. So I'm going to start on the shading. And this shading is going to require several layers. So this is just the lightest layer. So again, I'm just looking at the reference photo to see where the shading is. And I'm going right over my letters because I can come back and brighten those up. But right now I need to get my shading in. You do want to make sure that your lettering is dry before you do this. So the shading on this can, because it's so dented, may not make sense to you. So don't try to determine where the shading goes. Just look at the reference photo, because there's no way that if I were to just try to decide where the shading goes, there's no way I would get it right. You might be better at that than I am, but I really had to look at all the details in the reference photo. It's pretty cool when you're watching this, because just to see it come together with all the shading and details and stuff, it just really comes to life. I like paintings like this, but you do have to have patience, and I'm not real big on patience, but I made it through, and I really like how it turned out. This first layer of shading is very subtle, but that's what you want. You want subtle changes, and once they're all layered on top of each other, then it comes together and it makes sense. But like this first layer doesn't really make a huge difference. I mean, you can see it, but it's not a huge difference. But once we get the really dark shades in there, then you'll be able to see that this particular shade was needed. So I've got a little bit darker shade on my brush now, which is basically just less water in the brown. And so I'm just slowly going into my darker shades. If you'll try to not think of it as a dented can, but just think of it as lines and shapes and colors and shades, it'll make it easier to paint, because we kind of get it in our heads what something is supposed to look like, and it's hard to fight against it, because typically we're wrong. And so if you just look at the can as just shapes and stuff, then just follow the shapes and follow the lines, and it'll all come together. And that's the case with any painting. Some paintings are a little easier to determine what they're supposed to look like. A dented can is not something you see all the time, so you really can't go by memory. I know you probably don't want to paint over this white lettering and have to do it again, but that's just all part of it. So with a fairly dry brush, I've just got a little bit of black paint on it. I'm going into my very, very deepest, darkest shadows. And if you don't go all the way to this darkest shade, then you're not going to have the depth and dimension that you want. So you got to make sure that your lights are light enough and your darks are dark enough. All right, so I'm speeding through this. I'm just brightening back up that lettering. Okay, so now I'm starting on the white in the top of the can. So just look at the reference photo and see where the really white areas are. And I'm just using a small, I guess it's a round brush. You might call it a liner brush. It's got kind of long bristles, but it gives me that thin line that I want. And I'll show you after a while how to get a thin line without having to use the brush. So this is really what defines everything in the lid. It's all dark right now, so you need to have the light, the really bright white, to make it look like shiny, like tin. know there's a lot of layers here, especially with white, because you want white to be really bright, and it tends to, when it dries, it dulls down. So you do have to come back several times and brighten that up. Okay, so I've mixed up a pink shade because in my reference photo, right here where the can is dented, it reflects the color of the can onto that lettering. So this will just add more realism to it. There's just a couple of places where it does that. All right, and I found a couple places where I needed it to be darker. So I'm going back with my brown to darken that up, which will define the dents better. So you don't want to forget the bottom of the can. It's important to get the light shades in there too, because when we go to put the shadow underneath the can, then this needs to be like bright against it. Right now it kind of almost blends into the background, but the shadow will separate it. And right here, in taking a closer look at my reference photo, I felt like the bottom of the can needed reshaped. And it's easy to do that when you've got the white background, because you can just paint white over it. All right, now here's the step where you can do the white lines without a paintbrush. This is white out. It's just a white out pen. And it dries really fast. So like once you put it on there, it takes about probably 5 or 10 seconds to dry, and it stays on. So if you want a way to get really bright but thin white lines, then this is a good purchase. Or you can just, keep going over it with the white paint. And this doesn't dull down when it's dry, so once you put it on there, it's white. It doesn't get dull. And if you want, I'll just go ahead and put a link in the description for this if you want to order it. But you can buy it at any office supply store or Walmart or whatever. So I want to make sure that my darks are dark enough. Because the darker my darks are, the lighter my lights look. So you need that contrast to make it look like shiny tin. And now there's a little glare right here on this area of the can. It's really the only one. It's the only glare on the red. The rest is just color. Okay, so now I'm going to mix up a shade of highlight for the can. And I want this to be really subtle. Not so subtle that you can't see it, but I don't want it to be like a huge difference in color. And I've watered it down a little bit, and that is too subtle. So I'm going to add a little bit of white to it, just a tad. So I'm looking at my reference photo, and I just want to put this in the brightest red areas. So notice you can tell a difference, but it's not real obvious. It's very subtle. I'm seeing a little bit of reflective light on some of the edges. Right there I got out of line, but I can come back with white and fix that. Okay, so with a clean brush, I'm going to clean that edge up right there. All right, now I'm going to start on my stem. It's very simple, and I just mixed some yellow with a little bit of black to make this olive green shade. And I'm using a small liner brush. So I just want to make sure I get the direction right. The stem should be headed toward the center of the flower. So if you imagine it going on further, it should reach the center of the flower, and then it should go directly into the can, the hole in the can. And now I'm just putting in some more texture and highlights in my petals. I'm using quite a bit of paint on the brush so that when it dries, it will have some texture to it. All right, now I want to start on the shadow underneath the can. And I'm using a flat hog bristle brush for this, and I'm going right up against the can with my darkest shade, which is just straight black. I don't have a lot of paint on the brush, I just a little bit of paint, but right up against the can. And don't worry about, I mean, this edge needs to be right against the can, but don't worry about the other edge because we can clean that up with the white background color. So now with a shade of gray, I'm going to continue the shadow on out. So based on where the highlight is on the can, that one little highlight we had up there, based on that, the light is coming from like the left front side. So the shadow would be cast toward the back and toward the right. And with this hog bristle brush, you can just scrub this in and get that soft edge that you need on the shadow. All right, so right here is where the stem of the flower comes out. And then I just want to scumble in a kind of a flower shape. It doesn't have to match the flower, just something similar. And I can come back with white and clean up that anywhere that I don't like where I've gotten the shadow. Now I've got masking tape around the edges here, and when you do that, you can carefully peel it off later and have kind of a frame around it. Just make sure that before you start painting, that red is really dry, so that the tape doesn't pull it off. But there it is, guys, and I hope y'all liked it, and thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a great day, and God bless you.